The Rhulk we all know and love may have become the great subjugator, but he was born into humble beginnings, in a world abandoned by the traveler and fallen into an extreme military dictatorship. The regime, as it was called, took over the planet Lubre in the wake of the traveler's leave. Rhulk's parents, Rhulk and Varuna, were members of a wanderer clan, those who rejected the regime's control and journeyed across the planet as nomads. The regime, upset by their lack of complete control of the planet, would send out stalkers to hunt and kill any wanderer they came across. The sapphic sun was bright that day. Kids were out playing in the warm glow, chasing a furry pet. They giggle as their tired legs rush after the small animal, hoping to catch him. A young Rhulk stood nearby, watching the children run around in what he felt was a pointless activity. His eyes soon found the scurrying animal and glued them to its movements. Rhulk bent down and gestured towards the small furry creature, ignoring the other children. The children's pet wiggled back and forth through the grass, soon finding itself in the outward stretched palms of Rhulk. Rhulk gently picked up the animal and stared at it. The children chasing their pet ran over and stood nearby. Rhulk just stared at the thing and started to squeeze tighter and tighter and tighter, feeling the struggling furry feet on his fingers. How weak of a creature, Rhulk thought to himself. He methodically placed his other hand on the back of the furry animal's skin. The animal squirmed more and more as Rhulk dug a fingernail, piercing the skin. Blood started trickling down the once dry fur of the animal. After Rhulk had dug in far enough, he gripped the open skin and started to tug. With little force, the skin began to separate from the animal's body. The children nearby started to scream and cry, begging Rhulk to let their pet go. Their cries were ignored as Rhulk pulled more and more skin from the tiny body. Blood dripped from Rhulk's hands, creating a small pool at his feet in the dirt. Rhulk didn't care. This creature was worthless, and as it died in his hands, the only feeling that crossed his mind was pride. Pride, knowing how powerful he was and how undeserving of life this pointless creature was. Many nights later, Rhulk's father takes him out for a walk. The nights under their second umbral sun were very dangerous. That's when the regime's stalkers came out to hunt. And it was not long before the father and son found themselves looking on as a group of stalkers slaughtered a clan of wanderers. Rhulk was filled with rage, his blood boiling inside of him at the sight. He started to make a gesture towards the burning camp, and when he felt a hand on his shoulder, he looked up. His eyes met his father's. Rhulk knew his father was holding him back, not wanting his son to attack the bloodthirsty stalkers. Rhulk looks back as a stalker chops a baby in half before plunging his weapon through the chest of the baby's crying mother. Rhulk knew what his father was doing. He was teaching his son to feel powerless, to accept the way the world works. His father wanted his son to feel insignificant, pointless. Rhulk looks up at his father in disgust and rage. When his father returns his gaze, sadness filled Rhulk's father's heart. He doesn't recognize his son anymore. The look of his offspring was just burning with rage. One night, the stalkers come for Rhulk's clan, killing mothers, fathers, beheading children. The blood of the indiscriminate slaughter splatters across Rhulk's face and into his eyes. As his vision turns red, so does the rage inside of him. Rhulk can no longer stand by and watch, be weak like his father wants him to be. Rhulk rushes over, grabs a weapon, a glaive, from one of the stalkers and slices his throat. In a rage, Rhulk sprints to the next stalker, severing his arms from his body before slicing the top of his skull off. Blood sprays everywhere. Rhulk, however, has never felt more alive. He smiles with blood-stained teeth as he beats a stalker's skull in, blood exploding all over his laughing face. In the commotion of Rhulk's slaughter, he didn't notice his father being carried off into the forest by one of the stalkers as they started to make their retreat. Rhulk stands up after he ends the life of the final stalker and looks around, expecting excitement, pride from his mother, and the remaining clan members, he is met with shock and horrified expressions. Not horrified of the massacre the stalkers had done to them, but horrified at the retaliatory slaughter he did to save them. Rhulk knew his family was weak, pathetic. Rhulk felt nothing but joy. Joy at the death he caused by his own hands. While everyone was scared of him, he knew that tearing their bodies apart was the most he's felt alive in his life. He was banished after that, deemed a monster by his own mother and clanmates. Rhulk wandered on his own, exiled from his family. Alone for a year, he watched over the abyss that separated the Regime's city from the Wanderer's wastelands. He kept an eye on his old clan, noticing how the stalkers never returned to attack again. Rhulk searches for his father during his exile, naming the glaive he stole from a stalker after him. He calls it Rhulksword. He becomes the stalker of the stalkers, waiting in the dark to stab any of the Regime's huntsmen that he may come across. One night, Rhulk is ambushed by more stalkers than he can cut down and is carried off into the Regime's city and put on trial. He was shocked when he saw his father standing among the stalkers that took him. The father he spent the last year desperately trying to rescue and find standing before him, wearing the Regime's colors and insignias. It was his father who had sent out the stalkers to ambush him, to stop his own son from killing any more of the Regime's hit squads. Rhulk listens as his father testifies at his trial, begging the judge not to put Rhulk to death for his crimes. He begs that his son become a stalker working with the Regime to slaughter more Wanderer clans, slaughter the people that his father and him were supposed to protect. These clans that Rhulk wanted to protect from the very people his father sided with. Rhulk is filled with anger and betrayal as he listened to his opportunistic father wanting his son to slay his mother's clan. Rhulk knew in that moment that one day he would be the one to end the life of his coward father. The Regime accepts this offer and gives Rhulk back his glaive. His glaive no longer named Rhulksword in honor of his father, but changed to Rhulk's Bane in disgust. His father notices the name, and no matter how hard he tries, he cannot hide the fear in his eyes. Rhulk shockingly enjoys his time working with the Regime. No one judges his rage and bloodlust. They encourage him to kill, to slaughter the rats in the wilderness. No longer does he worry about where he will sleep or what he will eat. There is plenty. The fear that once consumed him as a wanderer soon disappeared and replaced with pride. Rhulk confronted his father, and he could see the fear in his eyes as Rhulk explained how happy he was with the Regime. It was a shock when Rhulk learned his father not only betrayed him once as a wanderer, but was now betraying him again as the Regime. Rhulk, filled with rage, chased after his father. Now was the time to end this coward, this betrayer. Rhulk's father sprinted down the streets, hoping to escape his enraged son. It wasn't long before Rhulk tackled his father and sent him to the ground. A scuffle between the two didn't last long, as his father overpowered Rhulk and made his escape. Filled with rage and confusion for the second betrayal of his father, he searches many nights for Rhulk. One night, many moons later, Rhulk spots his father, mother, clan mother, and many more desperately trying to escape near the abyss. Rhulk smiles, knowing his revenge is close. His father's life is almost over. Rhulk crept through the darkness, keeping his eyes on his former family and clan. Just as his father is about to help the clan children into a tunnel near the abyss, Rhulk jumps out with glaive in hand to confront them. Rhulk is conflicted as part of him wants to plunge his glaive into the chest of his coward father, while the other wants to help his family escape and allow them to live. The clan's people do not attack, but instead apologize to him. His father says he's sorry for the betrayal and indoctrination he gave his son. His mother holds his loving arm, asking Rhulk to remember the times he was happy as a child and how much she loves him. She cries as she says she's sorry for exiling him. Rhulk doesn't say anything. He just looks at them, confused. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe his time at the Regime clouded his judgment and turned him against his family. The family that raised him. The family that did, in fact, love him for who he was. Maybe he was wrong this whole time. This could be a new beginning. A fresh start for his clan and him. Rhulk's thoughts concluded as he felt his father's hands on his chest, and with such a force he felt himself falling backwards into the great chasm of the abyss. Rhulk fell through the darkness, looking up to his father staring down at him. Rhulk hit some jagged rocks on his way down, breaking his legs and puncturing his skin. With a thud, Rhulk hit the bottom of the deep hole, shattering his spine. Rhulk, surprised by his own survival even more than he was surprised at the abyss they thought was endless, did actually have a bottom. As he gathered himself, he was filled with rage like he had never felt before. For the third time, his father betrayed him. For the second time, he was betrayed by his mother. Rhulk looked around at what he felt would be his tomb. Darkness. Pure darkness. Not tainted by the light of the suns. Through the darkness, he heard a voice that welcomed him. This voice wanted to know who Rhulk really was. This voice had seen all of Rhulk's life and played it back for him, convincing the paralyzed librarian that he was justified in all of his actions. The voice was proud of Rhulk, even as Rhulk protested and begged for it to stop forcing him to relive his own life. The voice told Rhulk to be proud. These were his greatest achievements, and these amazing actions led him to the voice. Rhulk, confused, broken, dying, asked the voice who it was. The voice perked up with a sense of pride and said, "We are your salvation. We are your judgment. And soon, we will be your witness." The voice offered its luster to the dying Rhulk, and he gladly accepted. Smoky vines glimmered off the vague hints of light, moving in wisps towards Rhulk. Soon he was covered in the voice's luster, mending his broken bones and healing his punctured skin. Rhulk stood up, new, healed, fulfilled. As he stretched, he saw his glaive broken nearby. Moments later, the smoky luster trailed over the glaive, mending it, making it whole just like its owner. Rhulk emerges from the abyss, the voice's luster and power flowing through him. He catches up to his family. Fear palpates through the clan's body when they see him. Rhulk looks around the quivering community to see his father, mother, clan mother, children crying. Rhulk steps forward and with a single flick of his wrist removes the skin from his mother's body with his glaive. Blood trickles out of her body as her eyes silently bulge with horror and pain. It's not too long before she collapses to the ground, her eyes wide with no life behind them. Paralyzed with fear, no one can move as Rhulk takes his glaive and shoves it straight through his father's fragile neck. The man who betrayed him so often, mouth agape as his head rolls off his shoulders onto the wet ground below, soon to be joined by a slumped-over body. Rhulk is emotionless as he supplies each child's last breath, piling them together. It's not long before every member of the clan is slaughtered. He looks over the dismembered bodies, looks at his glaive. No longer will it be called Rhulk's That has been fulfilled. From now on, his weapon will be called Lubre's Ruin. Rhulk turns his rage to the regime, plunging the great city into a river of blood as he goes house by house, store by store, leaving no one alive. With blood dripping off his body and glaive, Rhulk makes his way to the city's control panel. This is where they monitor and control the Upended, a device the city used to siphon their sun's power and light. Using the voice's luster, Rhulk reverses the great upended power supply, shooting it back at the sun. He stared up at the sky as one of his suns exploded and cracked in half, plunging the whole planet in darkness. Rhulk stands before the abyss once more. It's all over. He's killed them all, ended all potential for life on his home planet. He starts to feel regret, shame. Staring into the dark hole, he stretches his arms out wide and allows himself to fall into the chasm. He doesn't hit the bottom this time, but falls into the embrace of the voice that never betrayed him, the voice that was always honest with him, the voice that didn't judge him but accepted and encouraged Rhulk to be who he was. Rhulk stood up in the darkness and breathes a sigh of relief, reborn as the first disciple of the Witness. Many years would go by since that fateful day in the abyss of his failed planet Lubre. Rhulk, Now the first disciple of the Witness took charge of his own brigade of Black Fleet ships, commanding them throughout the universe. With his newfound powers and arrogance, he burned worlds, executing all that were unlucky enough to be caught in his wake. At some point during his bombardment and genocide, he met a crazed fiend named Nezarec and granted him a glaive, introducing him as the second disciple of the Witness. Rhulk, bored of the destruction by his own hands, set his eyes on the Witness itself. His desire to be seen greater than just a destroyer, a subjugator. Rhulk knew that he could be seen as the Witness's equal. The Witness soon grew tired of Rhulk's challenges and gave him a task to prove himself. Insects. They were nothing but insects. Rhulk looked down on the unremarkable planet with amusement. He knew that this was his moment, the test of the Witness, to prove he was on the same level as his master. His task for Rhulk was simple. Do not destroy the ashlid insects of this planet, but bring them to enlightenment the same way the Witness had done for Rhulk. He must not make his presence known to the creatures below, but test them from afar. Rhulk arrogantly took the challenge. While he was used to glaive and flame, he would have to be a whisper on the winds. Something he was foreign to. For 14 years on this planet, Rhulk stalked in the dead of night and shadow, the mightiest of their warriors. Rhulk welcomed their anger, their wrath, but one by one they cower and flee. Disappointment and frustration was all Rhulk could feel as each of these warriors bled and died by his hand. Rhulk pondered what the Witness's true plan for these insects must be. They are weak, worthless. Was this all about him? Was the Witness's real plan to deflate Rhulk's ego? That must be why his master would force him upon such pointless creatures alone, without the help of his Black Fleet. With each death Rhulk brings, more fear cascades through the insect society. Rhulk looks on from afar as they accuse each other, desperately trying to find the cause of these brutal deaths. As Rhulk massacres more of the Ashlid, they start to fear each other. Governments and police begin controlling the masses. Rhulk scoffs as the imaginary lines are drawn and many countries are formed. The trust is broken with these insignificant gnats. Death comes to the Ashlid by their own hands as governments send armies to defend their pointless imaginary lines in the sand. Territory becoming the defining feature of trust. Many babies were born across the war-torn planet, and with each baby's birth, Rhulk was there. Rhulk looked on as a baby born in wealth and prosperity would never want for anything, cried in the arms of his jewel-clad mother. This baby would become soft, a stain on society. Rhulk knew this baby's life was not something to be proud of, that this baby would be better off dying in his mother's womb. A well-dressed father beamed looking down at the baby boy in his wife's arms. Rhulk turned his attention away from this disgrace to a room nearby. Inside sits a mother alone. No father in sight, but Rhulk knew there was no father coming. She wept into her hands. She is not happy like the other mother. She was worried. She knew she didn't have the means or wealth to provide for her own child, her little baby. A generation of Ashlid became victims of Rhulk's divine hand. Where a baby would have grown up wealthy, confident, weak, Rhulk made sure they only know suffering, pain, loss. Where a baby would only know hardships and embarrassment, Rhulk made sure no obstacles stood in their way, only knowing opportunity. This generation of Ashlid boast of their self-made nature. They overcame the harsh waves the world threw at them, not knowing Rhulk's interference on their path. A young Ashlid, Uin, the youngest of this generation, picks up a small animal. Rhulk looks at the child with pride as Uin slits the throat of his family companion. Stupidly, the child is sloppy and leaves the body in a trail of blood leading him to this brutal massacre. Rhulk almost cracks a smile as he cleans up after the stumbling insect. This one shows promise. No need for his path to be cut short by his parents seeing the art of their child. As the wars raged on throughout the Ashlid world, Rhulk knew he no longer had to direct the paths of these insects. As knowledge of the great purpose was passed from one to another, as one weapon was forged, then another, Rhulk knew his job was done. Rhulk knew the witness would be pleased at his work, that he could be just as respected as his master. This meaningless insect civilization was his path, his purpose, his glory. His only disappointment was Ewan, the same child he once prided himself in helping. Ewan never fully accepted his life path, too filled with fear at the darkness inside him. He would never know glory, just another worthless bug. Rhulk could do nothing to help him. He rejected the path, the pointless meaning of life. When the first atomic fire blasted the planet, Rhulk looked on in horror. After the first, there was another, and another, and another, until the sky was burning with nuclear clouds. How could this happen? Rhulk stared down at the smoldering planet. He led them down the correct path. He taught them everything they needed to know. He put them on the great purpose. Rhulk failed. A stray dot in the golden clouds drew Rhulk's attention. It grew closer and closer, going from a dot to a single spaceship. This ship knew of Rhulk's presence as it headed straight for the lone pyramid ship in the night. Soon Rhulk was looking down at the one he once rejected, Ewan. While this Ashlid may have cared too much for the pointless lives of his people, he understood how to survive. Only Ewan was smart enough to see the pattern and path Rhulk was creating. Rhulk looked down with pride at his rejected project. Ewan's breathing is heavy. Rhulk can see his chest rise as his heart beats fast with hate. Ewan lunges at Rhulk with his weapon filled with rage and confusion. Rhulk swipes him at the side, breaking the insect. Ewan stares up at Rhulk in fear, bleeding from where his arm once belonged. He begged and pleaded and crawled, bowing to Rhulk. Rhulk stares at the pleading bug, and in that moment of weakness, told him who he is. I am Rhulk. Ewan doesn't understand. There is no context or reasoning in Rhulk's words. Rhulk watched as the last bit of hope died in Ewan's eyes, and all that was left was awe and wonder, the same look he gave the witness upon their first meeting. The ocean of Fundament turned red as Rhulk plunged his hands into the side of the great Leviathan. Eons passed since Rhulk's failure with the Ashlids. Muted screams exploded from the beast's mouth as water, cold water, poured into the gaping hole where taut skin once was. Rhulk's hands searched, pulling apart flesh, muscle, and bones looking for his prize. The Leviathan was a steward of the sky, the traveler, the enemy. Rhulk needed what the Leviathan kept hidden deep below the ravaging waves. His hands firmly grasped upon a single rib. The Leviathan struggled and thrashed in the water, but to no avail. The sea beast was no match for Rhulk. Rhulk slapped the Leviathan's face, beckoning it to look at him. A giant eye filled with sorrow and pain turned to Lubarian. Rhulk looked it in the eye and tugged. The sound of bone cracking and snapping echoed throughout the ocean. Rhulk drew back all his force and kicked the Leviathan, sending it back several yards. The final force needed to release the bone that used to protect his heart. Rhulk, satisfied, swam, rib and toe, further down into the darkness of the waters. Rhulk soon came upon what he was searching for deep in the murky waters. Bars thicker than any tree lined the horizon, further than he could see. He could barely make out movement behind this massive cage, but he knew they were there. The 6 great worms, caged for their part in our master's army, discarded by a false god in the sky. One swam over to the edge of the bars and took Rhulk in. Rhulk could see starvation and despair in this one's face, long cut off from their substance supply. The others swam over. It had been a long time since they had a visitor that wasn't their jailer. Rhulk looks down the line, silently judging each one before tossing the Leviathan's rib in their direction. At that moment, they knew he was there to free them, that soon they would be able to feed once again. But their freedom would come with a price. They would have all the power and food they could ever want, but they had to be bound forever to a small, insignificant race of krill. They could go free, but their mother, Zeta, had to go with Rhulk to be used as a power generator for his world-ending machine, the Upended, and be a perpetual baby factory to produce endless worm larvae. Zeta looked at her starving children and agreed to Rhulk's proposal. He informed the worms that others would be coming to meet them. That is when they would be free. Rhulk left swimming to the surface with his slave prize. Rhulk took Zeta back to his ship, opened her mouth wide, and placed her below his Upended. The Witness's plan was coming together, and it was all thanks to Rhulk's involvement. He placed a hand on Zeta and walked down the length of her spine. He flicked a spot and stopped, pulling out a long blade. Carefully, he made an incision as the mother worm buckled in pain. He kept cutting till he had a rectangle about the size of a toddler. He then reached in, pulled the flesh cube from her body in a spurt of blood and tissue. Within a few minutes, the chunk of former worm mother shaped itself into a little larva. Rhulk, satisfied, placed it on a table nearby and went back to work cutting more and more cubes that would evolve into larvae. As Rhulk worked vivisecting Zeta, she looked at him, knowing he seeked the power of sword logic and a means to elevate himself to the level of the Witness. When Rhulk was content with the number of larvae, he left his ship and went down to the ocean planet. He looked over the drifting continents, calculating the sea's current. When he was sure at least one would reach the Osmium court, he tossed all the larvae into the ocean. The power of the worm gods was important, but the real target were the short-lived krill who were about to be destroyed in a war brought upon them by their stepmother. The Witness was already waiting when Rhulk came back to the ship. Together they watched intently for their plan to play out. They saw when the first larva came to the Osmium King. They smiled as he went insane, and the worm passed on to the cleverest of his daughters. The Witness whispered lies of a great wave that would destroy the planet through the worm. Rhulk stared as the daughter explained the situation to her sisters, finding a boat and traveling towards the worm's sunken prison. Rhulk became jealous at the attention the Witness was giving these pointless creatures. Rhulk's envy reached a peak when their goal was completed, and the Witness said, "One day that clever krill will be standing by your side as a disciple." Hundreds of thousands of years went by as Rhulk watched the krill go from a small, meaningless civilization to the destroyer of worlds. Rhulk never liked these hive, as they had called themselves. They were beneath him. It was unfortunate he found himself forced to spending time in one that he despised the most, Throne World. He wasn't sure if the Witness was punishing him due to his failure with the Ashlids many eons ago, or even if his master didn't trust the Witch Queen. Was he a jailer, or was he the one in prison? The reasoning was meaningless, as he would oversee not only the going-ons about the Throne World, but the continued production of more worm larvae to supply the ever-growing hive army. Soon the two would quarrel, the Witch Queen and Rhulk would write letters of his progress and annoyance to the Witness. To my Witness, I, your subjugator, do not understand why you have placed me in such a position as this. But it is not my place to understand what plans you have in store, but to serve your perfect final shape. I do not clearly see yet, but in time I will. Was I put here because of my failure with the Ashlid? Brought here because of my pride? They call themselves gods now, my Witness. These parasites think themselves as gods, and even though it was by our hand they came to be. I know the Witch Queen does not want me here. When I first arrived, she had forced delight on her face, but I could tell her eyes were filled with daggers. She may have created her throne, but it is I who am master of it. Boiling in a pot, the frog does not know the danger they are in. She thought this was her throne, but it is in fact her prison, and I am her jailer. It is not my place to question your wisdom or judgment, but I implore you to test her true devotions. She is not someone that can be easily trusted, and I fear she has other plans in mind. She speaks from both sides of her mouth so easily. I apologize for my delight in her lack of happiness from her current situation, but my witness, I promise I only find pleasure in her disgust because I want her to succeed with our helping hand. She is cunning, this one. I do not wish this, but if she tries to make a move against us, I will have no issues with bringing her to eternal release. Your blade, Rhulk. To my witness, I know it was her, my witness. The Witch Queen betrayed me. After so many years, I found myself outside this throne world, able to go on a conquest once more. I had so missed the destruction, the screaming, the bloodshed from these worthless creatures I subjugated for you. I longed for it, desired to bring my upended to a planet. I found one, a pointless little world far away. Its yellow haze and ruby clouds came into full view as I circled it with my ship. A single large ring spun around this planet, and that is where I made my conquest known. It shattered into wind-blown sand, raining shards of glass on the atmosphere below. I joyously watched as their bodies became impaled by my work. My happiness was short-lived, though. Little did I know there was a cult that worshipped the darkness and found blessings in their own oblivion. Someone put them on to the teachings that the shattered ring would mark their ascension. They stole my gift of annihilation for them from me, my witness. I know it was her. While there was nothing to pin this betrayal to the Witch Queen, I saw the hint of delight in her eyes as I told her about my failed conquest. If she ever turns on us, I will use the upended to destroy her throne world. Your subjugator, Rhulk. To my witness, it was I that informed the Witch Queen of her brother's death by our enemies. She was building a palace near where I rested my ship. I believe her to be somehow involved, and she felt that in the tone when I expressed my condolences. She said I was accusing rather than stating, and I must say she was not wrong. She was shocked when I explained she was the heir to all of her brother's dominion, his fleets, his armies, and his Taken. She remarked that if she had known, she would have found the secret of Taken herself. Little does she know I have secured her brother's chisel for myself. In my vault, I have the tool the Taken King used to write his vile tablets. I regretfully admit I laughed at her wanting to become the Taken Queen, and she was not pleased at my amusement. Even though I do not trust her, I did attempt to warn her. She was no longer protected by the long shadow of her brother, and soon the army of light would be coming for her. She simply scoffed and said there was nothing to fear from the sun. Your servant, Rhulk. To my witness, she has done it. I warned you of her defiance and potential for backstabbing. She has locked me away inside my own ship. I cannot use the upended without also destroying myself and all of our hard work. I know this must be part of your plan. You wouldn't let me rot away here. Luckily, some of those undead Alicini have found their way inside my home. Such silly creatures. Maybe I can recreate what we have done with the Hive and them. There was nothing that says that Hive are the only ones worm larvae will work on. We can have a new army, a stronger army. I am finding promise with my experiments on a very sturdy large scorn. I believe they call them abominations. These deserters of the deep. The witch's brother would be so disgusted by her actions. I think I spoke to our adversary, my witness. One of those flying orbs of light accidentally made its way to my hand. This little light was so confused. I could see the vibrations of fear in its glow. As I peeled apart its outer shell, it begged me to allow it to leave. But I had to understand this mysterious object. I asked it their purpose, and they said searching for someone worthy of their power and light. Who is more worthy than I? I am the great conqueror, the subjugator of countless worlds, the creator of the Hive. Then a voice that wasn't this little light shouted from the shell, saying I could not have this gift. I believe I was so close to understanding our enemy because the shards of broken glass and metal pierced my hand. All that was left was a smoking shell. The enemy would rather kill its own child before it allowed me its secrets. And that is how I learned you cannot simply take their hidden treasure, but you have to receive it as a gift. It must be willingly given. Your first disciple, Rhulk. Shortly after the death of the Witch Queen, Rhulk was greeted by the one who slew her and 5 of their friends. Rhulk was not scared. He welcomed them. It had been so long since he felt the pleasure of death in his hands. Rhulk had a plan. He could seal the throne world off from the light. This would take care of his Guardian and Lucent Hive problem in one simple blast of his upended. The Guardians that entered his home would help power his world-ending weapon with their bloodshed as they killed everything in their path. These worthless beings were not worthy of the witness. They would never know the embrace that Rhulk once felt many eons ago in that abyss. It filled Rhulk with purpose and pride to know he would be the one to subjugate these light bearers. He was not worried. He would toy with them. Who are they? He had felled the mighty Leviathan. He watched the light go out in his own mother's eyes. He moved against countless worlds, bringing wrath and everyone to their destruction. Rhulk found amusement as the Guardians quickly overcame his acquisition room. All those trophies and artifacts he knew they had to marvel at. Even upon their entry into his home, they were faced with his achievements. He knew they must feel like they made a mistake coming here. Who would ever willingly challenge him? Rhulk thought of his home, Lubre. He wished his betrayer of a father could see him now admit his worthlessness. Watch as he easily destroyed the last gift adversary would ever give this world. When the caretaker died, Rhulk felt a tinge of disappointment. His experiment he was so proud of was no match for these Guardians. How long did he spend trying to find a suitable match between Worm Larva and Scorn? So many died and placed in resin on his walls in the pursuit of this one perfect test subject. They would never know the witness. These disrespectful insects. They do not deserve the light or their own breath. The upended was almost at full power when the Guardians reached Rhulk's exhibition hall. Rhulk had spent a long time gathering trinkets from the solar system, even going into the Vault of Glass to retrieve what remained of one unlucky Guardian. When the Guardian stood before Rhulk's chambers above the upended, he felt his heart beat with glee. He couldn't go all out on them. The battle would be over too soon. He had to show them the same disrespect they had given to him and his witness. This would be easy. He had faced more worthy opponents in his lifetime than they ever had. He learned many years ago of an old Earth custom, tying one's hands behind their own back to show how easy their enemy was. That is what he would do. He would challenge himself, no hands, just using his resonance and legs. That would show the witness how valuable he was. That he alone could stop those that not even the Taken King, the Witch Queen, that fool Aramis could stop. In a burst of viney luster, the last thing ever heard from Rhulk was, "Witness, forgive me."